This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. And just like clockwork, just when things die down with Meghan and Harry in the media, out comes the Markles, quelle surprise. I'm not going to waste your time going into these articles because we all know it's a show. And quite frankly, I just don't care. Just be aware and pay attention to the media cycle and how this will occupy everybody's attention until the next attention-seeking publicity stunt that Meghan and Harry do. This is all part of the show, and I'm not going to give it air. What we do need to give air to is what is happening under the radar that nobody's paying attention to because we're all so distracted with this garbage. This past Wednesday, I barely saw anyone talk about Mark Zuckerberg spending more than 5 hours on the stand in Los Angeles Superior Court. He was testifying before a jury for the first time about claims that Meta deliberately designed Instagram to addict children. Now, from what I've seen, most of the limited news coverage focused on the dramatic show, writing about a bunch of internal emails marked up for everyone to see, a massive 35-foot display of the plaintiff's Instagram posts stretched out in the courtroom, and the description of Zuckerberg getting obviously frustrated during the questioning. But the bigger deal is what Wednesday's court session is really setting up for the future. And I don't know if anybody picked up on this. It's a future where radical leftist douchebags like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are quietly weaving their influence into a web of censorship disguised as child protection. This trial is being presented as all about protecting the kids. What it's actually doing here, especially with Zuckerberg's own words, is creating the political and legal foundation for requiring everyone on the internet to prove their identity, all under the sinister banner of safety pushed by these disgusting elites, otherwise known as the Epstein class. And this little bitch Zuckerberg, instead of fighting against it, he basically gave the court his own blueprint for how to make it happen, echoing the very agendas that Harry and Meghan have championed through their Archwell Fugazi public charity, where they railed against online harms while conveniently ignoring how their calls for regulation stifle free speech. So this lawsuit was brought by someone called KGM, who is now 20 years old, saying she started using Instagram when she was just 9 years old. She claims the app's design got her hooked on it, which messed up her mental health and led to stuff like anxiety, hating her body, and even thoughts of unaliving herself. Issues that radical leftists like Harry and Meghan love to spotlight in their crusades, using emotional stories to justify broader controls on what people can say and see online. And the issue that I have with all of this is, why is the parent not being blamed for allowing their child to get online and join Instagram? Now, it's my opinion, but a child at 9 years old has no business having unsupervised freedom on the internet. Like, at what point are parents going to be held accountable? Before social media and the internet, there was a thing called cable television where every show had a rating on it that would give an indication of what's age appropriate. I don't see why they can't apply the same concept here and let the parents dictate what their children is allowed to do online. In this case, a 9-year-old accessing Instagram, that's the fault of the parents. The child should have never have opened up an account or to be able to use Instagram without supervision from the parents. I mean, it is the parents' fault for giving the 9-year-old a smartphone. So currently at this moment, TikTok and Snapchat already settled out of court before the trial started. But Meta, who owns Instagram, and Google's YouTube are still fighting it as defendants in this case. There are more than 1,600 similar lawsuits across the country right now, and I guarantee you that those lawsuits are backed by political lawyers, if you know what I mean. Like the ones that Meghan and Harry are funding through their Archwell Fugazi public charity. I hope people are seeing the money-making gold mine here, because if a decision in this case goes in the way of favoring the plaintiffs, this could be the blueprint for how all the others play out. especially as figures like Harry and Meghan amplify these narratives in their speeches and on their websites and in their political partnerships with these leftist organizations pushing for this digital reform. This whole thing hinges on a hotly debated scientific idea that social media can actually be addictive like a drug, and that this addiction directly causes the real damage. I mean, Meghan Markle herself in 2020 referenced social media users like drug users. This is the core argument in driving the legal tactics and all these news stories that push for these new laws, often amplified by people like Harry and Meghan, who have the reach to push out this kind of messaging and frame that these online platforms are toxic, not taking into any consideration that some of the people who are putting the content out there, like Harry and Meghan, are toxic themselves. When you think about it, if these people can sue for mental health, then why can't we sue for mental health with all the saturation of this garbage that Harry and Meghan put out there to divide and cause chaos? Why aren't we entitled to sue these platforms for that? I could make a good argument as to how toxic Harry and Meghan are and the harm that they caused so many innocent, unsuspecting people directly. Now you can understand why Harry and Meghan have weaponized mental health and used it to manipulate the masses. We saw Meghan lie on TV about her so-called unaliving herself, and then used it again by exploiting those dead children with the Parents Fugazi network. Calling it an addiction really is how you frame it as a public health crisis. And this is what Harry and Meghan have been pushing. It's a crisis like that lets governments grab emergency powers and sidestep normal rules like constitutional rights, powers that radical leftists, including Meghan and Harry with their anti-misinformation campaigns, are quick to support when it aligns with silencing dissent. Before the Twitter files exposed the government colluding with social media companies to silence voices, this protecting the children wasn't going on. Now, all of a sudden, since Elon Musk bought over Twitter, you have all this concern for the safety of our children. Get out of here with this. When you apply those powers to the internet, it leads to required controls on who can access what and surveilling what you are saying. And that kind of setup spells the end for being able to speak anonymously or under a fake name online, something Harry and Meghan hypocritically demand for themselves while advocating policies that strip it from everyone else. So, when you look at this, as they are framing social media and labeling it as a drug, meaning it's addictive, then getting on it turns into something doctors and regulators then start to control. Who gets to use it, how they use it, and under what rules. That's up to the authorities now, not just you deciding for yourself. Authorities influenced by leftist agendas that Harry and Meghan actively promote through their foundation's work on so-called digital wellness. Sure. If we look at this on the surface from a marketing perspective, you can use the language of regulating a harmful addiction over saying exactly what they're trying to do, which is censor free speech. In the real world, the tools that they want to put in place end up forcing people to prove their identity, locking down access with restrictions, and building a massive surveillance system that tracks users no matter what app or device they're on. This is a system that the Epstein class has been trying desperately to get into place, and we now know why. So now this trial setup, I think, is worth looking at on its own, because when we look at this law from 1996 called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which has basically protected online platforms from getting sued over stuff that users post. But in this case, the lawyers found a little loophole. They're saying the platform itself, the actual product, is faulty. Now, this is a tactic that aligns perfectly and in lockstep with the leftists who are pushing product liability arguments like Harry and Meghan have been doing in their calls for holding tech companies accountable for harmful content. Like, we can't forget when Meghan sat up there in that toilet paper outfit for Project Healthy Minds and talked about seatbelts and guardrails. She was alluding to this. It's not about what users share, but it's about how the app is built. That's the route that they're going. It's like endless scrolling, videos that play automatically, push notifications pumped up by algorithms, and beauty filters that can make people hate their bodies. Mark Zuckerberg and the rest of these tech bros can do the right thing and adjust their algorithms to not target children. They can easily do that, but they're so greedy that they can't help it. And then you have the politicians who also want to capture the youth, and people like Meghan and Harry who are straight up predators who have the money to pump in content that do influence them. These people are the people that are at fault. Like, I don't see why we all have to now suffer the consequences as a result of their own defects, I want to say. It's their fault in why these algorithms and the children now are, anxious. Look at the whole climate situation. How much fear have these globalists pumped into the youth? A lot. And a lot of that is conveyed over social media. So now, if the jury sides with this 20-year-old woman, it would give lawyers in those other 1,600 lawsuits a proven way to bypass Section 230 when it comes to how platforms are designed. All while radical leftists like Harry and Meghan cheer from the sidelines, thinking that they're the ones who are responsible for getting this movement. And they use these victories to push their vision of a controlled internet. That's the end state that Harry and Meghan have been driving since they got here. That's a huge shift in how the internet companies can be held responsible if this loophole does work. That's a huge shift in how the internet companies can be held responsible. All pushed by trial lawyers using a mental health angle that is still being argued over in scientific studies, and now being amplified by celebrity influencers who position themselves as victims while enabling and supporting the censorship machine. So in this hearing, Zuckerberg got grilled with internal company docs, like a 2015 guess that 4 million kids under 13 were using Instagram. About 30% of all American kids aged 10 to 12. They even read an old email from Nick Clegg, James Holt's old boss, who used to run public policy at Facebook. In quotes, he writes, "The fact that we say we don't allow under 13 on our platform, yet have no way of enforcing it, is just indefensible." Zuckerberg admitted they were slow to fix it. And he is quoted saying, "I always wish that we could have gotten there sooner." Revelations like these are catnip for figures like Harry and Meghan, who use them to fuel their campaigns against big tech, conveniently overlooking how their proposed solutions erode privacy for all. Zuckerberg's full of shit. He knows very well that they were trying to capture the youth to keep them online longer because it spelled revenue dollars. That's all that matters to this guy, is money. Zuckerberg also said to the jury, in quotes, "I don't see why this is so complicated," when asked about age checks. But his suggested fix for that is the real issue that I have at hand with this. One that dovetails with the radical leftists' push for this narrative control. During his time on the stand, Zuckerberg kept saying that checking people's ages shouldn't be up to each individual app, but handled at the operating system level by companies like Apple and Google. He explained to the jury that those operating system makers are in a better spot to build age verification tools since they control the software on most smartphones. Doing it at the phone level is just way simpler than making every single app handle it on their own, he said. He even added that it would be pretty easy for them to pull it off. Ideas that radical leftists like Harry and Meghan, through their advocacy for child online safety bills, are all too happy to endorse as they align with their vision of a monitored digital world. Pay attention to that, guys. Zuckerberg isn't just suggesting that Instagram check the ages of its own users. He's pushing for Apple and Google to verify the identity of every single person using a smartphone for every app, right in the phone's core software. Once that setup is in place, it won't stop at social media. We know this. It'll cover every app on your phone, every website you visit through the browser, and every message or call you send via any app, creating the perfect infrastructure for a surveillance state. This goes way beyond just checking ages. It's like building a nationwide digital ID system directly into the two main operating systems, iOS and Android, that power almost all smartphones on the planet. Yeah, this is a system that these radical leftist globalists, Epstein class, would exploit to track and silence many of us. I think it's time we take a really good look at these applications. Like, can we do without Instagram? I think so. Can we do without Facebook? I think so. Do we need to use Google as our search platform? No, we can use DuckDuckGo. Mark Zuckerberg is such a little bitch because essentially what he wants to do here is shift the blame onto Apple and Google to take on that liability. He doesn't think that it should be the responsibility of his company or other applications to monitor and make sure that children are not accessing the app or that it's age appropriate. He doesn't want to do any of that. He's going to want to put the burden now onto Apple and Google, and I'm pretty sure they're not too happy about that. So come to think of it, once this system exists, guess who gets to decide which apps need ID checks? That would be Apple and Google. They'd basically become the official ID bouncers for the whole internet. Two huge private companies already facing big antitrust heat for controlling app stores are now getting even more power over who can access what online and under their real name, all under the watchful eye of whether it be government surveillance, Five Eyes, backdoor channels. Nah, this is not a good idea. Nope, don't think it is. While we're so distracted with all this other bullshit, Zuckerberg's idea for age checks at the operating system level slots right into laws that were already in the works before he testified on Wednesday. Laws that Harry and Meghan have implicitly supported through their public stances on online harms as well as through the courts. In California, there's SB 976 called Protecting Our Kids from Social Media Addiction Act. It requires social media apps to set up age verification systems in the state. The Ninth Circuit Court has basically said that they're not deciding if this messes with free speech rights under the First Amendment until those rules are actually written. So age checks for regular online talk in California are moving ahead without anyone sorting out if it's constitutional yet. At the federal level, well, we know that there's the Kids Online Safety Act, otherwise known as KOSA, otherwise known as the American version of the UK's Online Safety Act, which currently right now is pending. It would tell government agencies to create age verification right at the device or operating system level, just like what Zuckerberg pitched from the witness stand this past Wednesday. And just like what Harry and Meghan's foundation, Philanthropies, promotes in their push for safer online spaces. KOSA also has loose definitions of quote-unquote harmful content that could let the government push platforms on what to moderate without any outside checks. It's packing age checks and content controls into one bill, with the feds deciding what they deem as harmful. This is a dream come true for the Democrats because they're the ones who are pushing this shit. Now, in New York here, apparently New York's Safe for Kids Act blocks algorithmic feeds, like endless personalized scroll, for users who don't verify their age. Instead of handing over a government ID, you could use stuff like facial scans to guess age, which means collecting biometric data just to browse your feed. Data that the Epstein class, like Harry and Meghan, with their privacy bullshit, would never subject themselves to, but are fine imposing this onto the masses. The setup these laws demand creates piles of data that absolutely will get hacked. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when, and subpoenaed by authorities or matched up with other info. I think being able to speak anonymously is super important because it protects whistleblowers, it protects survivors of abuse sharing stories safely, it protects people fighting back in oppressive regimes. You know, even the smallest things, it protects folks quietly researching health issues and journalists shielding their sources, or anyone whose safety relies on keeping their online self separate from their real world ID. You know, what we see within this Epstein class that consists of Meghan and Harry want to take away that anonymity because they don't like people speaking out. They don't want to be challenged. It really is this elite class that has been driving this headache for all of us. Now, my final thought here on this is that, like, forcing identity checks at the operating system level will kill privacy for everybody. You know, you could pretty much blame Harry and Meghan for everything that's wrong in the world since they have been the poster children for everything to the left. You know, looking at this, you would think that this all kicked off with the word addiction. I can't help but remember Meghan comparing social media users to drug addicts. You know, this leads to calling it a public health crisis, which justifies emergency powers, then age checks, and finally full ID verification baked into your phone software. And this, my friends, is where all of these globalists want to push us towards. We see what's going on in the UK. They're not as subtle as we are here in the United States. We're so distracted with all this other garbage that this is going on right under our noses. These people are not giving up on trying to control the narratives. Every link in the chain is sold as doing it for the kids, but we all know it's about control, driven by these sick fucking people. And that's my opinion that I'm allowed to have. But what do you guys think? I mean, it's all so annoying, but we have to really pay attention to it because it is slowly being taken out right from under us. All because we're so distracted by this other crap. I mean, how many people are actually talking about this? I don't think many. How many people reported on Harry and Meghan pretty much trying to take credit for Jules Law and supporting what's happening in the UK with the anonymity being removed and being able to get people's data? I don't think anyone, except for myself, is talking about it. This stuff affects each and every one of you. You know, you don't have to take my word for it. This is not conspiracy. Look, I did raise the alarm back in 2021 when all of this was going on, and now look what's going on in the UK. Nobody wanted to listen. Nobody paid attention. We need to learn from it if we don't want this to happen. And I think many of us should start thinking about how do we become less dependent on technology. If you have any good ideas, drop it in the comment section below. I personally think that we should bring back the landline telephone into the home. That's just a thought. Anyhow, let me know what you think. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe and I will talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.